Hello everyone, I'm Timothy Young, and welcome to Cottage Salon number 101. I'm sorry that we have to do this again via technology. It would be nice to have you here in the living room as we do poetry so that I could hear the sighs, see the nods or the head shakes, get a little feedback on the poems. Yet we can't do that, so we'll have to be satisfied with a poetry scrum in which I read the poems. This time, I'm going to read poetry from three of my favorites, and I'll read a few of my own. This includes Tao Jin, who was born by our reckoning in 365 AD. Also, I'll read Juan Ramon Jimenez, who was born in 1881 and died in 1958. He was a Nobel Prize winner from Spain. I'll also be reading selections from Tom Hennen, who was born in Morris, Minnesota in 1942. And Tom has appeared here a couple times at the Cottage. He's read with Thomas Smith and myself. And Tom lives just a short way away from here. And then I'll include a few of my own. Now, a poetry scrum, as Thomas R. Smith and I have developed it, includes poems that go from poet to poet to poet to poet, from theme to theme to theme to theme, each one responding to the previous poem. It's a lot of fun, and we never know how it's going to work out. This time, of course, I was able to select all of the poems myself, but more or less I picked them randomly to see how they would fit together. Kind of a poetic divination. So tonight I'd like to start with Tao Jin. Tao was probably the first Chinese poet to write about personal issues, write about his home and his surroundings and his family. So here's an untitled poem by Tao. Great men want the four seas. I've only wanted old age to come unnoticed like this. My family together in one place, kids and grandkids looking after each other still. I linger out mornings over koto and wine, the wine jar never dry. My clothes a shambles, exhausting every joy. I sleep late now and nod off early. Why live like those fine men, hearts stuffed with fire and ice to the end? Their 100-year return to the grave, nothing but an empty path of ambition. Kind of a good poem for this time when we're all staying at home. So from that poem I took the word linger. And here's a poem by Juan Ramon Jimenez. It's called The Odor of Jasmine. What a sadness, as in the odor of jasmine. Summer returns to burn the streets, darken the houses, and at night trickling rays of starlight heavily weigh on eyelids laden with nostalgia. On the balconies, white, silent women linger until late at night, resembling phantasms. Sometimes the river sends forth a tired breeze. Perhaps is a romantic and unattainable music. The penumbra glistens with sighs. The world becomes, in a magical forgetfulness, afloat in the soul. And dragonflies are caught in languid hands, and the high moon stagnates among the constellations. What a sadness there is in the odor of jasmine. Pianos are opened. There are warm glances everywhere. In the depths of each azure shadow, a passionate and languid vision dissolves. So now, a poem by Tom Hennen. Tom is this wonderful poet, quiet, almost shy, like that little bird that hides in the bushes. You hear him softly, but he has some deep, important things to say. Tom Hennen's A Man Too Much in Love. It was the women in the Jimenez poem that triggered this poem. The first woman who left him pushed him over a cliff. At least, that's what it felt like when he landed 2 months later. She had come to him out of the warm afternoon, dark red hair and innocent face. In the air was the perfume the ground has when it first opens up in spring, when all the birds become dizzy and some even drop dead with happiness. The second woman who left him pulled all his teeth. At least that's what it felt like for 2 years and a day afterward. She had shining blonde hair, a face that hit him suddenly as sun in the eye the first time he saw her. Only later was it like seeing a birch tree alone on a hillside, yellow as a lamp in the rain. The next woman who leaves him will find that he will get up each morning anyway, that he will fall in love once more with windowsills and grasshoppers, with long-legged pine woods, and words that can be used over and over again in the moonlight. Women. Here's a poem of mine from an unpublished manuscript I'm working on. I used some paintings by Andrew Wyeth, N.C. Wyeth, the American Sublime Painters, and the cave paintings of Lascaux as prompts. And this poem is from Andrew Wyeth's painting of Helga, The Crown of Flowers. Crown of Flowers. Andrew Wyeth sought that narrow place where contraries hold together. So Helga wears a crown of flowers and the same expression as Jesus on the intricately carved crucifix that I inherited from Granny. While our flower bed rests beneath 2 feet of crusted snow, dry hydrangea flowers wiggle in the wind. Granny called them snowballs, but in February they are tanned colored and skeletal. Valentine's Day roses open on our table like a happy chorus. Their scent is a good one. Sometimes flowers stink, and sometimes the scent of roses reminds me of the mortuary where Granny laid out. So many inherent contraries. The prettiest girl, the flower of our town, played a dour judge in a television movie. The shyest boy in math class filled football stadiums with power chords from his thrashing guitar. In Illinois, a cabbie runs a free sweat lodge for wealthy men in recovery. Across the state, a happy widow who grew up in county foster homes died at home surrounded by flowers, sunshine, and her faithful children. Wyeth knew that dreams and memories are flowers forever growing out of the unknown. Timothy, misers will never know the wealth Blake and Whitman bequeathed you, and they died as paupers. My poems in this collection are my variations on the American Guzzle that I watched Robert Bly use about 20 years ago. And in that poem and in other poems, I use the word flower in each little stanza. It's just part of the way that guzzle develops. So here's another poem by Tao Te Ching, or Tao Ching. I have the Tao Te Ching in mind. Old friends share my weakness. They come bringing full wine jars and spreading bramble weave mats. We sit beneath pines. After a few rounds, we're drunk again, esteemed elders yakking away all at once and losing track of who's pouring when. Soon, that sense of knowing I exist, gone. Nothing's precious, nothing worthless. All distance. We're lost where we are. Oh, this wine hides such bottomless flavors. I'm taking Tao's poems from the translations by David Hinton. That was a great book. David did a great job bringing the old Chinese poetry into contemporary times. And Juan Ramon Jimenez, I'm taking some of his poems. The first poem, Odor of Jasmine, was translated by H.R. Hayes. This one is translated by Elaine Roach. This is from Jimenez's book, Platera y Yo, Platero and I, the book of his little donkey. He speaks to his donkey about the place where he grew up. Platero and I. This one's wine. You see where it came from? Platero. I have told you that the soul of Moguer is bread. No, Moguer is like a pipe of thick, clear crystal, waiting the whole year through under its round blue sky for its golden wine. When September comes, if the devil has not spoiled the feast, the cup fills to the brim with wine and overflows like a generous heart. The whole town then smells of wine, more or less generously, and tinkles like crystal. It is as though the sun gave itself a liquid beauty for our 4 pennies, for the pleasure of finding itself enclosed in the transparent cup of the white town, and of gladdening its good blood. Every house is, in every street, like a bottle in Juanito Miguel's or the royalists' wine shop when the dying day touches them with sunset light. I am reminded of Turner's Fountain of Indolence, which in its lemon yellows seems painted with wine. Thus Mauger, fountain of wine, which like blood comes endlessly to wash its every wound. Source of sad gaiety, which, like the April sun, rises in springtime every year, but falls each day. So, I took that word those words, sad gaiety, and I thought of this poem by Tom Hennen called Plains Spadefoot Toad. Toads are smarter than frogs. Like all of us who are not good looking, they have to rely on their wits. A woman around the beginning of the last century who was in love with frogs wrote a wonderful book on frogs and toads. In it, she says, if you place a frog and a toad on a table, they will both hop. The toad will stop just at the table's edge, but the frog, with its smooth skin and pretty eyes, will leap with all its beauty out into nothingness. I tried it out on my kitchen table, and it is true. That may explain why toads live twice as long as frogs. Frogs are better at romance, though. A pair of spring peepers were once observed whispering sweet nothings for 34 hours. Not by me. The toad and I have not moved. So that thought, it brought into mind the toads and frogs, and it made me think of a poem that I have with leeches, or a leech. And I took this poem called Engraved Animals, prompted by a picture of cave painting in Lascaux. Again, you'll see that there's something hidden going from verse to verse, connecting the verses. And I'll end with a verse that speaks to myself. One of the great little claims that the ghazal writers put in their poems so that everyone knew who the author was. But it also separates the author from the writer, the soul from the intellect. At least that's what I'm trying to do. Here's Engraved Animals. Throughout Lascaux's caves, animals are engraved in the walls by sophisticated artists. Their accuracy and imagination is far more than the initials I carved on a stone bridge's pylon. When the artist scratched a stag's head into yellow stone, he showed what was meaningful to him. When a lover carved a heart and arrow in a tree, then 4 initials, he wanted his love to last. As my wife and I dangled our feet in the rushing Kettle River, a ribbony leech swam toward my foot. I instinctively withdrew it and watched the graceful being find refuge between 2 boulders. That is all we want, to thrive in this powerful current of living. We move with the current and struggle against it. We always use another's life to sustain our own. In existence, we are all leeches. The engraved deer antlers might be a map of a river system, one creek after another flowing into a large river, and the river flowing into a larger being. Isn't art a map towards living's vastness? The sophistication of cave art and the leech's seemingly simple life remind you, Timothy, of an intricately larger life beyond yourself, beyond your scratched poems, your past loves, and beyond time. So, Juan Ramon Jimenez. I first read him in graduate school about 40 years ago. I fell in love with his work. His poems about New York were fantastic. So here, again, animals, from the leeches, the frogs, and the toads, led me to this one. It's called Unveiling. A black bull, the night departs, all somber flesh, full of fear and mystery. It has bellowed frightfully, immensely, to the sweating terror of all the fallen. And the day comes, an unsullied child, seeking trustfulness, love, and laughter. A child which, far, far away, in the secret recesses where beginnings and ends meet, was playing for a moment in some unknown meadow of light and shadow with the bull that fled. So that was the black bull in Jimenez's poem. And that reminded me of my poem, The Black Bull. The black bull of Lascaux is perfectly drawn in stride. Bulls look awkward when they run. I felt that way too, as I read of the bulls running in Hemingway's book. The black bull of war's shadow can emerge with awkward fury. It finds a crack in the soul of a Marine. Then it rushes out, awkward, tentative, and scraping the earth with a wounded hoof. In this picture, the bull's eye is half closed like the weary soldier, or a convict who tries to hold to his integrity in a cavern of brutality. Once a man knows life's extremes, it's hard to hold his eyes open. I knew a man who had his eyelids surgically tightened so that his business card face looked more youthful. He couldn't accept folds of wisdom trying to protect him from the world's speedy cruelty. Timothy, in a photograph on a book cover, Black Elk's eyelids drooped as he stared at you from many directions, looking through many realms, like the black bull of Lascaux. And of course, Tom Hennen, the farm boy from western Minnesota, has a number of poems about animals. And here's one about a cow. It's entitled Sweet Milk in the Wet Snow. Milk cow in the smoky snow, eyes dark as the water. In the box elder grove behind her, large flakes of snow pile up on the bones that show through her back as she eats at the snowbound hay in the trough. Only the black spots on her hide can be seen. She chews and chews until her ruminations have taken her far from the cow yard. Soon in the storm, she will disappear completely, her heavy body adrift among the snowflakes. And that leads to a poem by Tao. In the east garden, there's a green pine overgrown with brush. Its beauty is shrouded. When frost comes, killing everything else, its majestic, towering branches appear. No one noticed it among the trees, but now it stands alone. They're amazed. My wine jar slung from a cold branch. I keep looking, far away. Here, in the midst of this dreamed sleight of hand, what could ever tangle me in the world's tether of dust? I know when I read Tao, the first time I had a teenage, when I read him, I had a teenage son at the time. My son is now grown with his own family. However, those of us who are parents, who have watched our teenagers, we sometimes wonder what's going to happen to them. Are they disappointing us? Because sometimes we feel disappointed, especially when they're teenagers. So Tao Chian wrote this. It must be one of the earliest poems ever about family life. It's called Scolding My Sons. My temples covered all in white. I'm slack-muscled and loose-skinned for good now. And though I do have 5 sons, not one of them prizes paper and brush. Ah Shu, already twice 8, and who's ever equaled him for sheer laziness? Ah Xuan is 15. Time studies began, but he's immune to words and ideas. Young and Duan are both 13 now, but they can't even add 6 and 7. And Dongju, who's almost 9, does nothing but forage pears and chestnuts. If this is heaven's way, I'll offer it that stuff in the cup. It needs a drink. Raising teenagers. You know what I'm talking about. So, here's another one of my poems. Swarming Like Monkeys. Now this is taken from, or this was prompted by N.C. Wyeth illustrations for the Robert Louis Stevenson book, Treasure Island. I loved that book when I was a boy. And looking back on the book, in many ways it's a story of initiation of teenagers and the path that can go one way or the other. Not that I totally approve of the path young Jim Hawkins took. However, he had to grow up. And this picture showed the pirates swarming over the walls, trying to take over the palisades and the stockade where Jim and the others were locked up, protecting themselves. It's called swarming like monkeys. Last weekend, I envied the bloodroot's beauty, and I told it so. I hope my breath became compost for the flower's soul. Envy is a fog, and it belongs among the flowers and trees. My wife's first husband, a fine art painter, taught her to see a flower's aura. She practiced for weeks until, aha! I've never seen an aura, but I never worked hard enough. In some conversations, a non-response is the look of envy. A person's bowl of shame emits the vapor, yet shame can lose its smell and become sweet compassion. Sometimes envy colors my thoughts in deceptive hues. I'm not immune to its push, and my ego mustn't stuff it. The deep soul knows that a vice is the shadow of a virtue. Timothy, your thoughts are monkeys swarming the stockade. Their footprints are manure stains on a carpet of white clover. Your feelings are small waves in a storm. Let the swarm go by. So I took the word vapor from that poem, and it brought me to this poem by Tom Hennen. It's called Tracking the Breeze. Deer tracks are easiest to identify, sunk in the mud along a cattail slough, or cutting sharp hearts in new fallen snow. Even the myopic amateur is certain about deer tracks. It's the other marks that cause you to lose your confidence. The long-fingered imprint of the raccoon makes you think of a strange child, barefoot, on all fours, wandering the creek banks. Or the claws of a porcupine that poke holes in the soft ground far ahead of its footpads. Tracking in dry dirt or over hard ground is an act of faith. It depends on how well you pick up scents, how much you've learned from the night air when the coyote is out giving lessons to the sheep on how to survive on the odor of starlight. Tom has such a wonderful way of taking you deep into the place where he's at. Connects you to all those different places, above, below, inside, outside. So I have one more poem, this one by Juan Ramon Jimenez. And I took the odor of starlight and brought this poem, because I've already read the odor of jasmine. But this is the odor of starlight from Tom Hennen into the clear night by Juan Ramon Jimenez. The crenellated white roofs are etched against the cold, starry blue sky. The quiet north wind's caresses are keen-edged. Everyone believes he is cold and hides in the house and closes it. Platero, you and I shall go very slowly through the cleared, solitary town. You warm under your wool robe and my coat. I with my soul. What an inner force uplifts me, as if I were a tower of crude stone capped with intricate silver work. See how many stars in the sky. There are so many, they make me dizzy. The sky might be a world of children saying over to the earth a flaming rosary of ideal love. Platero, platero. I would give my whole life and wish you might want to give yours for the purity of this high night of January, so alone and clear and hard. That's the scrum for this month. I've got a few things lined up for the upcoming months. I hope you're back here. I will be posting this on YouTube. It will be available after May 16th. In the meantime, if you want to check it out on the YouTube channel, this is my YouTube channel, Tim Two Boots. I have almost 70 recorded poems on there, some with music, some with photographs. There are also a few clips from previous Cottage concerts. So check it out, especially if you enjoy poetry and poetry with music. I look forward to seeing you here in our house the next time we can gather together, share some poetry and music, maybe some storytelling. The time will come again, we know that. The intimacy of friends and laughter, of sharing the deep soul, the scent of starlight, the odor of one another's love. Thank you. See you next time.